I found the Bangor hotel receipt on a Monday night, folded inside a landscaping brochure on the kitchen island. At first, I thought it belonged to one of Matthew's technicians. He managed commercial HVAC crews across southern and central Maine, and receipts followed him home in strange places: tool bags, jacket pockets, the cup holder of his truck. Most of them were for fuel, hardware, or fast food eaten between service calls. This one was different. Pine Ridge, Bangor one night, Tuesday. Room 214. Matthew had told me he was in Augusta that Tuesday. He had texted around 9 that night saying the boiler certification was running late and he was too tired to drive home. I remembered because I had eaten leftover soup alone and fallen asleep on the sofa with the television on. He came home Wednesday morning before I left for the college, showered, changed shirts, and acted as though nothing about the night required explanation. I stood at the island holding the receipt until the garage door opened. Matthew came in through the mudroom, carrying his work jacket over one shoulder. He looked exhausted. There was grease on the side of his wrist and a dark semicircle under each eye. He went to the sink and washed his hands. "Did the water bill come?" he asked. I put the receipt on the granite. "What were you doing in Bangor last Tuesday?" The water kept running for another second. Then he shut it off. Matthew looked at the receipt. He did not jump. He did not ask where I found it. He just rubbed the back of his neck. "There was a call farther north. You told me you were in Augusta. I was in Augusta. And then?" He looked toward the mail. "I had to deal with something else." "What?" "I don't remember exactly. School district, maybe. That week was a mess." "You don't remember paying for a hotel room?" His face tightened. "Alex, I had 3 crews running around and 2 emergency calls. I was tired. I stopped somewhere instead of driving. In Bangor." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" He gave the smallest shrug. I didn't think it mattered. That answer bothered me more than a bad lie would have. Matthew picked up the receipt, crumpled it once, and dropped it into the trash. Then he opened the dishwasher and started loading plates. That was Matthew. If something could be handled with his hands, he handled it. The sump pump made a strange noise. He was downstairs before I noticed the basement floor was damp. The front door leaked cold air. He bought weather stripping. The boiler clicked. He knew which valve to clean. For most of our marriage, his competence had felt like love in a practical language. I taught administrative policy at a community college and spent half my week explaining deadlines to students who believed dates were suggestions. I managed committee meetings, budget memos, appeals, and an endless parade of forms. At home, I liked not having to manage everything. Matthew fixed things. I kept the paperwork moving. We had been married long enough that the arrangement felt less like a decision and more like gravity. That night, I let him load the dishwasher. I let the conversation die. But the hotel receipt stayed in my mind. Bangor, not Augusta. Room 214. The following Saturday, the boiler started clicking. I had forgotten to schedule the annual service. Usually, I made the appointment, even though Matthew knew more about the equipment than anyone his company might send. He hated calling his own office about our house. "I meant to schedule it," I said. Matthew stood in the kitchen in pajama pants, holding a coffee mug. "It's fine. I forgot. I heard you." He opened the basement door. "I'll look at it." I followed him downstairs. I told myself I wanted to learn something. Mostly, I wanted to watch him. His hands moved over the boiler with complete confidence. He removed a panel, checked the trap, cleaned out a little sediment, and reset the system. 20 minutes later, the clicking stopped. "There," he said. "Nothing serious. Thanks. No problem, he climbed the stairs. I stayed in the basement for another few seconds, looking at the machine. Matthew could hear one bad sound in a boiler and know where to look. I had a receipt in my kitchen and still didn't know what I was looking at. That afternoon, we drove to the hardware store for weather stripping. We talked about foam versus rubber seals. We argued mildly about whether the front door needed a sweep. For 40 minutes we looked like ourselves. Then I saw Matthew glance at his phone in the parking lot. His face softened. It was subtle. A private little smile. My stomach tightened. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Who was that?" "What? Your phone?" He looked confused. Dave sent a picture from the shop. One of the apprentices mounted a disconnect box upside down. That was funny. It was impressively stupid. He opened the truck. I felt embarrassed. I had already turned a coworker's joke into a secret message from another woman. That scared me. Not because it proved Matthew was innocent. Because it proved I no longer trusted my own interpretation of ordinary things. When we got home, his phone rang in the kitchen. This time he answered on speaker while pulling the weather stripping from the bag. "Hey, Claire." His sister sounded tired. Their father, Arthur, had a specialist appointment in Bangor on Wednesday. Claire had planned to take him, but one of her kids had been sent home sick, and she couldn't make the drive. "I can't get out Wednesday," Matthew said. "Corporate audit." Claire sighed. "I know. I'm just out of options." Matthew looked toward me. He should have asked. Instead, he said, "Alex might be able to do it." I felt my shoulders tighten. He covered the phone. "Can you take Dad Wednesday?" "I have a budget meeting." "What time?" 10. "The appointment is 1:30. "That's not enough time to drive to Bangor. You could move the meeting." I stared at him. Claire was still on the line. "I can hear you both," she said. Matthew frowned at the phone. Claire continued. "Alex, you don't have to. I can call the clinic and push it." I appreciated her more in that moment than I could explain. Arthur's health mattered. So did my schedule. Nobody needed to turn one into proof of the other. I said, "Let me see if the dean can move the meeting to Thursday. If she can, I'll take him." "Thank you," Claire said. Matthew looked relieved. That bothered me, not because he loved his father, because the relief looked almost personal. On Monday, the dean agreed to move the meeting. I called Arthur myself. He sounded grateful, but not desperate. "Your son has you all acting like I'm on my deathbed," he said. "You're not?" "Not this week." I laughed. "We'll leave at 10:30 Wednesday." "Fine." Then he added, "I'm glad you're driving." Matthew drives like the entire state is late. Wednesday morning was gray and wet. Arthur slept for part of the drive. When he was awake, he talked about birds, the cost of heating oil, and a neighbor who had started parking too close to his mailbox. He did not talk about dying. At the clinic, I realized I had left his medication list on the kitchen island. I felt my face go hot. "I'm sorry." Arthur looked at me. "They have computers here, don't they?" "I think so. Then civilization survives." Claire texted me a photo of the list. The appointment went fine. While Arthur was with the specialist, I sat in the waiting room, scrolling through my phone. A message came in from Dave at Matthew's shop. "Audit's finally over. Corporate guy left before noon." Matt looked ready to throw him into traffic. I read it twice. Matthew had told Claire he couldn't leave the shop Wednesday because of the audit. The audit was real. That should have made me feel better. Instead, I started calculating. Bangor to home. Augusta to Bangor, noon to evening. Hours appeared everywhere once I began looking for them. I hated myself for doing it. When I drove Arthur home, I asked him a question I hadn't planned to ask. Does Matthew ever stay with you after late calls? Arthur turned his head. At my place? Yes, not that I know of. I kept my eyes on the road. Why no reason? Arthur studied me for a moment. Then he looked back out the window. That usually means there's a reason. I found a hotel receipt. He was quiet. Another woman? I don't know. Arthur rubbed his thumb against the seam of his trousers. My son is many things. That sounds ominous. It wasn't meant to. He thought for a second. Matthew disappears when he's tired. I glanced at him. What do you mean? When he was a teenager, if the house got too loud, he'd sit in the shed for an hour. Your mother-in-law thought he was sulking. He said he liked being somewhere. Nobody was asking him anything. I felt a strange chill. Did he ever stay gone overnight? Arthur shrugged. Not when he was 16. When I pulled into our driveway, Matthew's truck was already there. He was in the garage working on a valve. How'd it go? He asked. Fine. He helped Arthur out of the car. I watched him steady his father by the elbow. The tenderness was real. That made the uncertainty worse. After Arthur was settled inside, I stood in the kitchen while Matthew sorted the mail. Dave texted me. Matthew's shoulders changed, only slightly. What about? The auditor left before noon. He left the building before noon. You said you couldn't get away all day. I couldn't, because, reports. Crew issue in Lewiston. I've told you. You could have driven your father. Matthew dropped the envelopes on the counter. I could have driven him if I canceled the rest of my workday. You told me the audit made that impossible. It made the day impossible. That is not the same sentence. He looked tired now. Not guilty, tired. Alex, what are we actually talking about? The hotel. He looked away. There it was. Not proof, but recognition. I said, who were you with in Bangor? No one. The answer came too quickly. Matthew, no one. Then tell me why you lied about where you were. I didn't. You told me Augusta. You stayed in Bangor. I worked in Augusta. And then? He ran a hand over his face. Can we not do this with Dad in the next room? No. His jaw tightened. Alex, no. I moved a budget meeting. I drove your father 4 hours round trip. I spent the entire day wondering whether you had sent me to Bangor so you could have the house empty or disappear somewhere else. I am not waiting until the timing is comfortable for you. Matthew looked toward the living room. Then back at me. I wasn't with anybody. What were you doing? He did not answer. That was the moment I thought he was having an affair. Not when I found the receipt. Not when he smiled at his phone. When he stood 6 feet away from me and seemed unable to say what had happened in a hotel room, my chest felt cold. Say it. Matthew pulled out a chair and sat. For the first time that evening, he looked older than tired. He looked ashamed. I slept. I stared at him. What? I slept. In a hotel. Yes, alone. Yes. Why? He pressed both hands against his face. Then he said, because I didn't want to come home. The kitchen went very quiet. I had expected another woman. Some part of me had almost prepared itself for the clean violence of that answer. Instead, I got something shapeless. You didn't want to come home. That night. How many nights? Matthew did not answer immediately. How many? 4. The room shifted. 4 hotel nights? Since spring. And you lied every time? I said work ran late. Work did run late. That isn't what I asked. He looked down at the floor. Yes, I sat across from him. Why Bangor? It wasn't always Bangor. I felt sick. Where else? Augusta once. Waterville. Bangor twice. He looked at me quickly. No one was with me. Stop saying that like it fixes the rest. I know. Do you? He leaned back. I would finish a day and I'd be sitting in the truck knowing that If I came home, there would be something. I almost laughed. There is usually something. That's called living somewhere. I know how it sounds. No, tell me. He rubbed his hands together. Dad's appointments. Claire needing help. Something at the house. The boiler. The gutters. Your committee problem. A bill. Dinner. A conversation I didn't have the energy to have. I felt the anger arrive slowly. You went to hotels because people needed things from you. Sometimes. And what exactly do you think happens when you don't come home? He looked at me. I know. Do you? My voice rose. Because the gutters still exist. Your father still has appointments. Claire still calls. The water bill still comes. I still come home. I know. No. You know now because I found the receipt. Arthur coughed in the living room. Neither of us moved. Matthew lowered his voice. At the hotel, nobody needed anything. I looked at him. I could order a sandwich, take a shower, watch television, sleep. Nobody asked me where a tool was. Nobody asked me if I had called the clinic. Nobody wanted me to explain why a crew missed a certification. And you think nobody asks me for anything? No. Then why was your solution to disappear instead of ask me for help? I wasn't asking for help. What were you asking for? Nothing. He gave a bitter little laugh. That was the whole point. I sat back. That hurt in a way I had not prepared for. Another woman would have meant he wanted someone else. This meant he wanted no one, including me. Did you ever think about telling me you needed a night alone? Of course. And I knew you'd ask what was wrong. Something was wrong. I didn't want to explain it. So you lied. Yes, he finally said it, without softening it. I looked at the weather stripping, still sitting on the counter. Matthew noticed. I was going to install that tonight. Of course you were. He frowned. What does that mean? You fix everything that doesn't talk back. That's not fair. No, it's not. I stood. I'm going upstairs. Alex. I stopped. I'm not leaving you. That isn't what I thought you were doing. I mean now. I'm not saying I want out. I turned back. I don't know what I want. His face tightened. I need you to understand something. I understand that you were exhausted. That's not all. I know. No, I don't think you do. I pointed toward the garage. You made me rearrange my work because you were unavailable. Claire rearranges her life. I help with Arthur. You solve everyone's emergencies until you can't stand anyone anymore. And then instead of saying no, you vanish. Matthew did not answer. That is not rest, I said. That is outsourcing the cost of your rest. He looked at the table. I went upstairs. We did not solve our marriage that night. We barely spoke the next morning. Arthur went home with Claire. Matthew went to work. I went to the college and sat through the budget meeting I had moved. For once the meeting was exactly as boring as it had promised to be. I was grateful. Over the next week, Matthew stopped volunteering me for things. Not because we created a rule, because I think he was afraid to. Claire called about Arthur's blood work and asked me directly whether I could take him. I said no. She said okay. Matthew took him. He had to reschedule a site visit. The world did not end. At home, the boiler kept running. The weather stripping stayed on the counter for 3 days. Normally, that would have irritated me. This time I left it there. On Thursday evening, Matthew finally picked it up. He stood by the front door with the roll in one hand. Then he put it back down. I'm not doing that tonight. I looked up from the table. Okay, he waited. I realized he was waiting for me to react. Why are you telling me? Because apparently I don't know how to say I'm tired before I get resentful. It was not an apology, but it was closer to the truth than all set. He went upstairs. That draft stayed under the door. I felt it around my ankles all evening. 2 weeks later, Matthew came home from a service call in Augusta at 7. He stood in the kitchen without taking off his jacket. "I want to stay up there Thursday night." My stomach tightened. He saw it. Alone. I didn't ask. I know. Why? Because Friday starts at 6, and I don't want to drive home at 10 and leave again at 4:30. That sounds reasonable, and because I want a night where I don't talk to anyone. There it was, the part he had hidden before. I did not like hearing it. That mattered too. "You mean including me?" "Yes." I looked at him. He did not look away. "Okay," I said. He exhaled. "But you tell me where you are." "I will, and you don't use work as an alibi for a decision you already made." "I won't." "And if Claire calls about Arthur, you answer her." He nodded. "That's fair." Fair was not the same thing as healed, but at least it was spoken. Thursday night, Matthew stayed at a motel outside Augusta. He texted me the address without being asked. I slept badly anyway. Around 1 in the morning, the boiler clicked. Once, then again. I lay there staring at the ceiling. My first impulse was to text Matthew. I didn't. At 6:30, I called a local heating company. They sent a technician at 10. He cleaned a sensor, checked the pressure, and charged me $189. I almost laughed when I saw the invoice. Matthew would have fixed it in 20 minutes for the cost of a rag. That afternoon he called. "How's the house?" "The boiler needed a service." "What happened?" "Sensor." "I could have told you what to do." "I know." There was a pause. "Did you call somebody?" "Yes." "How much?" $189. He made a sound of physical pain. I smiled despite myself. "That's obscene." "Probably. I would have done it tonight." "I know." Another pause. "You didn't want to wait." "No." He understood. For years, I had accepted the convenience of having a husband who could fix almost anything. Now I was learning that sometimes independence had a service fee. That night, when Matthew came home, he looked at the invoice on the counter. He picked it up, shook his head, and put it back down. Then he glanced at the front door. The weather stripping was still sitting there. "You want me to finally do that?" I looked at the thin line of cold air beneath the door. "Tomorrow." Matthew nodded. "Tomorrow." He did not pick up the tools. He did not say it would only take 10 minutes. He made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table for a while. Without pretending, the silence meant everything was fine. The hotel receipt was gone. The doubt was not. But at least now, when Matthew needed somewhere, nobody asked anything of him. I knew where he was going. And he knew disappearing was no longer the same thing as resting.